All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming in. I know it's the lunch hour, so it's a busy one, but we are so excited for you to be here with us today. We're going to be talking about optimizing costs, controls as we democratize data and AI, right? One of the things that's kind of the big scary or the big question mark as you're onboarding many more folks, right? Democratizing AI sounds amazing until you get down to the nuts and bolts of like, oh shoot, I have 200,000 more people using Databricks or with access to Databricks in some way. What am I going to do now? So we're going to talk a little bit about Databricks' evolution, and then we're going to have a couple of our customers kind of tell you directly what their evolution has looked like as they've scaled and adopted and kind of grown in their Databricks usage. It's not going to be just me, and we're going to get into some Q&A, and hopefully we'll leave with a little bit better understanding of some of the kind of things to look out for, best practices, and things to put into practice. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Miranda. I am a product manager here at Databricks. I focus on the AI BI side. So when we talk about kind of democratizing data, scaling user access, usually some of the products I work on are behind the motivation for that. And very keen to kind of make sure that as we're building and helping you scale, that we're doing so in a controlled way that gives you all of the kind of governance knobs that you need. Great. So we want to democratize data and AI for all of our employees, right? It's the dream. We want everyone to be as effective as they can. We want self-serve. We want everybody to be able to kind of get off and running without bottlenecking on any one particular analyst. But the reality of what Databricks has been in the past 10 years, if we think about its evolution, it started for like a tiny sliver of the company, right? Databricks, as Ali mentioned this morning, started as a managed Spark company for data engineers, right? There were about 5 people working together in a workspace. They all sat in the same room. Somebody needed access to something. They just went like, oh, hey, Patrick, can you give me access to that? And then, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. Oh, it's over here in this directory, right? You didn't even need search. Your search was your friend. That was a very different world, right? So we started with that kind of a Databricks that was built for those scenarios and that scale. Super easy to govern, right? You're governing the 5 people sitting around you. But then when we wanted to think about how is Databricks evolving, like we started to add the notebook, we started to add some ML capabilities. Okay, now you have some different departments in Databricks, right? You have data scientists, you have some ML engineers, and now you're trying to figure out, okay, well, I've now tripled, the departments using Databricks. They can't just talk to each other across the room anymore. I really need to think about what are my processes as I'm adding more users, what are the policies I want to put into place for how they're using Databricks, how they're collaborating with each other. And it's a whole new set of challenges, right? It's not just a go crazy, it's coming out of your budget and good luck. So as Databricks has expanded kind of its capabilities and led to more of that kind of opportunity to democratize data within the organization, there have been some new challenges, right? And those are important to think through. And as we started, we started with just the data engineers, added on our machine learning engineers and our data scientists, and then we added a data warehouse, right? So all of our SQL Fluent analysts came in. That was another order of magnitude growth. And with that investment was also paired Unity Catalog. That was a big transition for a lot of our existing customers, but was critical kind of foundational work as you try to kind of scale. So what is kind of the next phase of scaling we're thinking about, and what do we want to make sure we're supporting you as you kind of grow through? And that's AI BI. So both the dashboards and Genie side of the house, kind of our business intelligence platform. Right? The promise of Genie, the promise of dashboards is to kind of have a seamless single source of truth that is accessible by anyone in your organization. But again, when we say anyone in your organization, that's a little bit of a scary thing, right? How do I actually get everybody in here securely? How do I make sure that they're not all spinning up infinity compute? How do I make sure that they're kind of adhering to the data governance policies that I want to enforce in Unity, et cetera? And it's a challenge, right? It's something that's really important for us to think through. Growth is good, but doing it in a stable and safe way is critical. And that is what we're going to go ahead and talk about a little bit more today. So with that, I'm going to invite Vivek from OneTrust to come up and share a little bit about their journey. Vivek.
Thank you, Miranda. Good afternoon, everyone. How many of you have heard of OneTrust? Some of you, definitely. And how many of you are Databricks customers today? And how many of you have actually tried to democratize data and ran into a problem where, because of cost concerns or governance issues, not able to scale it? So there are a few of you definitely, right? So my name is Vivek Srivastav. I am the SVP of Engineering at OneTrust. And I'll talk about the journey we have taken in the process of going from Mongo from a long time to Databricks and where we are, and talk about how we have actually democratized data and open access to most of our users and customers as well. So OneTrust, if you don't know, OneTrust provides a platform to responsibly collect, govern, and use your data. And if I have to simplify that, if you think about, you go to say McDonald's, or you're using looking at an NFL game altogether on any of the devices, or OTT devices, mobile devices, laptops, you provide some data about you, and the data is collected, and you provide it for a specific purpose. How do you make sure the data is collected for the right purpose, governed correctly, risks are identified, and you provide access controls on the data? That's all powered by OneTrust behind the scene for several large customers, and I'll show a slide on the number of customers that we have here. We have about 14,000 customers, 11 million users, 3.7 million vendors, 5.5 billion consent profiles, and 3 billion consent transactions per day. It's a large volume of data we're talking about. Last year we processed about 10 trillion HTTP requests, 10 trillion HTTP requests, and the trillion requests also contain about 200 petabytes of data transfer. So it's a lot of data we are talking about here. So we have solution for every stage where we actually go and collect the data, we govern the data, and use the data responsibly. We have behind these, all of these solutions that we have, you see the screen, there are 26 different models, I would say that, behind, or data models behind that. We say that to suppose and service these requests that we're going to talk about in second year. We have 14,000 customers, and we said that you can see these customers across every industry, whether it's media, healthcare, finance, technology, everywhere. We have 120 environments. There are 60 environments that are production environment, 60 non-production environments across 14 countries across the globe. We have to do it primarily because of regulatory requirements where the data transfer policies are enforced and we are not taking the data outside of the country. So that's why we need to have all of these environments. So to truly scale to this large volume of data for 3 billion transactions, 120 environments, we need to ensure the data is managed effectively, costs are kept at bay, and we put right controls and access governance around this data. But so in a SaaS environment, when customers start to use this data, so I didn't talk about, so 14 environments, we have a lot of these customers, the name brand, large customers, they have their own specific dedicated environments. So we're talking about 120 environments, dedicated environments, which is a lot of volumes going through this data altogether. But customers, what they're looking for, the data we collected, they're also looking at this data to be married with their systems altogether to drive downstream applications altogether. One of the example could be looking at the marketing, right? So we have provided this consent, and they want to go and look at this data, say, okay, I want to drive my marketing campaigns using the consent data that you have provided. So we have to provide the data back to them, or ask them to provide their data so that we can provide this analytics and dashboard to govern and provide this analytics they're looking for. There is a lot of expectations from customers about, I want to have a self-service BI and AI, right? So BI was important earlier. People talked about BI, have a dashboard. I should be able to build my own dashboards, build my own KPIs. But now people are looking for AI capabilities as well. They're looking for, how can I actually go and build my own chatbot and ask questions on my data set altogether? So, and then there's lots of regulatory requirements as well from a GDPR, CCPA across the board. So we have to make sure we are also, when we are capturing this PII data, personal information, we capture this data and provide governance around these regulations as well. And we need to provide security across all this data. So that's the expectation from all of this thing that we do it, and the customers have this expectation. So we started our journey in 2018 with Mongo. Originally, back in the day, if you rewind 7 years ago, the expectation was, if you can provide me my data, give me some analytics, build me dashboards or a report, I think it'll be good. But as the data starts to grow for us, we need to start thinking about how can we provide a little bit more analytics on top of it, self-service BI capabilities, and scale to the volume that I talked about earlier. So we made the decision by evaluating several other vendors and decided to go with Databricks. And I'm glad we made the decision to go to Databricks, because what you have heard earlier today, that's going to power us going to the future of what we're trying to do it from a governance, from a self-service capability, AI, BI, building agents on top of that. So a whole lot of activities that we can do it on Databricks going forward. Also, so we built all these dashboards earlier, but the customer's now expectation is, now I want AI capabilities, NLP capabilities. So now we are starting to explore natural language capabilities within Databricks and start to provide that capability of self-service AI, self-service BI, and you can, so I'll show a demo in a bit here. So from an architecture perspective, think about, again, going back to 120 environments, and we have to deploy this architecture across those 120 environments. Our primary data store is SQL, which is running on Azure ecosystem. Databricks and our primary applications all run in Azure ecosystem. And we have large volume of customers. So a lot of these environments are actually also multi-tenant environments. So the 14 environments that I talked about earlier, they are across geos, and they're multi-tenant environments with thousands of customers in one environment. So we need to make sure that we are not creating a noisy neighbor problem when we are trying to get data from SQL into Databricks altogether. So we have to start to create some dedicated lanes for that data. We need to make sure that the data is aggregated in bronze layer, cleansed, aggregated, and we service the data through Power BI. In SQL, our architecture is actually we have one database per tenant. But when we get the data into the bronze layer, it is all coming to the same workspace altogether, but we need to make sure when we go back to cleanse the data and make it consumable for the customer, the data is actually going back to its own workspace altogether, so, or containers. So that's what we do it. We use Power BI embedded to build all these reports and analytics on that. So this architecture, talking about billions of transactions deployed across all of these large environments altogether, and at a scale, and it has to be cost effective and governed properly. So we ran into several challenges during the process. As you can imagine, talking about 160 environments, it means deploying Databricks, Kafka, SQL, everything has to be deployed. The infrastructure cost, the storage cost, the VM cost, all that is going to be start to add up slowly. We're also looking at data sets where we don't have access controls and governance. We're talking about 26 different applications that they talked about. Everybody has their different access controls on the data set. So how can we start to build these access controls on that so that everybody has consistent access, the right governance in process altogether? And since we are in the privacy industry, we need to definitely make sure that we are also handling all the privacy readiness is there, and also looking at auditability of the data is there across the entire data set. Who used it, when used it, how was it used, what was the purpose of using it, and build trust across the data. So we have to look at multiple options to go and optimize cost. So first one, we start to look at how do we actually go and look at when the data lands into the bronze layer. So a lot of data is coming in. We saw the 3 billion transactions, and I only talked about a small subset of the data without the 3 billion transactions, specifically what we are collecting it. But we also have data that we have captured from metadata that we have captured by scanning different environments altogether, and also looking at privacy data, a lot of other data that comes into risk data, a lot of data comes into our environment. So we need to make sure that we are looking at the data and keeping the data relevant for a duration that is required. So we start to look at different environments and say, okay, we need to start to look at how do we keep the data and look at time travel requirements. Sometimes we have to go and replay because there are challenges where the data in SQL may not be reflecting correctly exactly every single time because something failed in between, and it may not be reflecting correctly in Databricks. So we need to go and make sure a process is identified to go and do that sanity check of the data and then and replace those events if required. But in certain environments, we said, do we need to have 15 days or month of data for time travel, or we can actually go and reduce the data by a significant volume. So we start to clean the data, and by environment, we start to look at what exactly should be our data retention policy should be on those environments. And specifically our internal environment starts to even reduce it to 1 day or even the lowest number that we can go down to. Also looking at, they talked about multi-tenancy. So we have, in one of our larger environments, we have 5,000 customers or 5,000 tenants in one environment. This is a large number of tenants altogether. And all of these are large companies. You saw some of the media companies. They have to actually look at consent data that's pushed into OneTrust constantly. And this data is coming in, that data need to be actually go and cleanse, and we need to make sure these large customers are not impacting these smaller customers by creating a noisy neighbor problem. So we start to create, by the data segregation, start segregating the data by what kind of data that we are trying to send it, and then we go and start to group those tenants separately so that the data is coming through constantly, the live data is coming, the migrated data is coming in a different stream altogether, and the tenants that are in a lower priority are not getting impacted. We started to look at also from a pilot light perspective. What does that mean? So we are not on Unity Catalog yet. We are actually in the process of migrating to Unity Catalog. But we have to start to think about when the servers are up there, if there's no use or less use, how can we actually go and reduce the composition of the server, the VM size altogether, or even from a Power BI side? How can we scale it down automatically so that it is running at its low capacity altogether, and whenever the first stream of data starts to come, we start to actually go and ramp it up. So we start to look at building these pilot light jobs and have some of these environments where they are shut down or slowed down, and then with the first stream of work comes, and this talking about 5,000 tenants, they are across geos. So never know when the volume of data is starting to surge. We always have peaks and valleys across the entire day. And then we look at the weekend shutdown for some of those environments as well. And looked at serverless capabilities also to start to say completely go and shut down some of those environments, and they'll come back up as and when needed. So with making all of these changes, we were able to save about $150,000 per month on our environments across these environments. So the significant cost savings we were able to achieve by making these changes. We were able to So we have scaled from 5,000 customers to 25,000 customers. So if you look at on the left-hand bar, we have about $200,000 per month expense on this VM and Databricks SQL cost altogether. But when we start to scale up to 25,000 customer environments, we were able to actually scale to 5 times the customer by only increasing the cost by 50%. That's a significant ramp up, and we were able to scale up the customers without impacting our cost drastically there. But to do all that, we need to be proactive about how do we monitor our data, how are we looking at costs. So education is extremely required to make sure everybody in the company understand where exactly you are spending your cost, what the cost components are, and specifically in case of this environment, we need to look at Power BI costs, we need to look at VMs costs, networking costs, DB SQL costs. All those costs has to be looked at across all of these environments on a week-by-week basis, and we go and look at it if there are any changes that has happened across these environments. If the cost is gone up, how can we start to go and monitor and see what could have constituted to increasing the cost, and then we go and decrease the cost after that, or make conscious effort to identify the problem and fix it. So for doing the cost analysis, we used Azure Cost Analysis as well as Cloud Zero. But to optimize the cost, we need to start looking at Azure Workbooks. And we have built our own Power BI dashboards to go and look at across every environment, what is the cost per week, and how do we actually monitor and see what could have constituted this increase in cost and reduce that. When we went to Databricks, we were able to also provide almost about 20 different dashboards, canned dashboards to our customers directly with 40 plus marketplace visuals that are available that customers can pull it and build their own custom visuals. We were able to scale to billions of data points, and that was required because we have this large volume of data that's coming in across the board. And complex data models, because we talked about 26 different data models or schemas that we have behind the scene. So we need to make sure all the data is flowing into Databricks and these relationships are built correctly so that customers can actually go and build an aggregated dashboard across these different data models to provide board level reporting which goes across the entire suite of applications. So Databricks, they made all that possible for us because of the scalability changes that we were able to accomplish there. Here you are seeing some of our dashboards that we have built. On the left-hand side, it is the dashboard that we have to build it, homegrown dashboards that we have it earlier. This was built for Mongo. On the right-hand side, these are the Power BI dashboards we have built it. So as you can see it here, we were able to slice and dice data. We can drill down and provide a much more compelling visual where people can go and slice and dice the data depending on their needs. This is for a risk management solution, and the next one is for consent management solution. So once we have gotten all of this data, one of the requirements for us to go and look at, okay, now we have all of this, how can we actually go and provide AI or NLP capabilities on that? So I talked about regulatory intelligence earlier. So we have a framework for regulatory intelligence and the content for regulatory intelligence called dataguidance.com. And we can actually go and provide the content on what exactly the regulatory requirements are there for your data if the data moves or their data breach happens. So we have built a chatbot on that. So that provides the regulatory intelligence. And the same chatbot is now extended to use NLP capabilities. And you can now go and find out exactly if you want to query specifically about your data. You can use natural language and query the data and provide the regulatory intelligence or ask any specific questions on your data right in the chatbot there. So we have built it using large language models. Again, we are not in AI, BI, or Genie yet, but it is all homegrown built using AI, BI, and translating SQL to NLP to SQL. So key takeaways. So if you have to talk about democratization of data must be a cost discipline is required. I did talk about a couple of things earlier, saying how critical is to have a security rigor as well as the cost discipline. What we have done it earlier, we did not pay quite a bit of attention earlier for looking at the cost, and we decided to look at the cost when cost starts to overrun later on. So one of the key takeaway for us was to start to look at cost on an ongoing basis, analyze and educate everybody in the company and say, okay, this is the cost going to be and how you can actually start to experiment and look at these changes on an ongoing basis. And governance also comes into play, saying that governance is going to sometimes have an impact on your innovation altogether. So governance is not a blocker in our case. Sometimes governance is required to make sure that you have the right controls in place, and that's enable business accelerators. So you don't actually go and build and duplicate the work multiple times. And everything starts with good data. You have to build the right data set, quality of the data, and use data responsibly. If you want to continue the conversation, we are at booth 322. Please stop by there. And if you want to have a chat with me or connect with me on LinkedIn, please feel free to do so, and we will continue the conversation there. With that, I'll hand it over again to Miranda.
Thank you very much. And I'd love to welcome Anoop up to the stage as well from another one of our customers, Yipit Data. You guys go ahead and take a seat. I'll get us transitioned over here. So let the music quiet down. Awesome. Great. So thank you guys both for joining us today. I know there's a lot going on in real life, a lot going on at Data and AI Summit too. But I'd love to start, Anoop, I know Vivek got to introduce himself. Perhaps you could give everyone an idea kind of yourself, what you do, your journey with Databricks.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. My name is Anoop Sagu. I'm the chief architect at Yipit Data. I've been at the company for almost 9 years. We've been a long-standing Databricks customer and definitely gone through a lot of the journey of data democratization. Just a little bit of the background about what Yipit Data does. We analyze billions of data points every day to provide insights that are both accurate and timely, that cover thousands of companies, multiple industries. Our primary customers are institutional investors and Fortune 500 companies, and our goal is to just help them make better decisions, whether it's investment decisions or strategic decisions. We want them to have the right data to make that information. We acquire multiple different types of data sets, license them, or build them ourselves. We bring it all together, make sense of it. That's really where our value proposition is in that analytical capability, and we use Databricks to enable that. So kind of like what Miranda was getting at, for us, we've been going through a huge data democratization journey over the last several years, partnering with Databricks. At this point, roughly 60% of our employees either actively use Databricks on a weekly basis, and probably 80% of our employees are probably interacting with some data artifact that's coming from Databricks. So it's super embedded into all of our data operations. As a data business, you can kind of see there's just a lot of natural overlaps with the platform Databricks provides and how we can kind of operationalize it.
Awesome. So Anoop, you mentioned, you've got, 60% of the business in Databricks frequently, 80% kind of interacting with artifacts regularly. How do kind of some of the different roles interact with Databricks? What are they kind of doing to get the right data access, and how are you controlling to make sure they're not going crazy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Vic touched about this too, but like data access, really important to get right, and cost controls play hand in hand with that. We have a 20 petabyte data lake, so we can't just have all of our, 60% of our employees just querying that on a regular basis. For us, like we think about data access as what is your role and what are your business needs, and that kind of basically dictates, what kind of data sets you're going to work with, and what types of services are you going to interact with that. I think with Databricks, you have so many tools in front of you, so you have to be kind of smart about who gets access to what, and there's a lot of ways to kind of control that. The way we think about some of our personas, like we have our kind of at our core and like more entrenched in Databricks are data engineers, data scientists. They're going to be using a variety of products from Databricks, whether it's the notebooks, there's classic compute. They'll also be doing a lot of stuff with like model serving and endpoints and the data science tools that are there. They're going to be more technical focused, and they'll typically have broader data access because they need to do a lot of that data transformation work. We'll also have data analysts, and they'll typically get more involved more at like the silver and gold level of our data sets, and they will be sometimes using notebooks, sometimes using AI, BI dashboards. They're kind of doing that final level analytics, kind of providing the artifacts that go to our customers. But then we have a lot of data operational folks that have been kind of growing over the last several years, especially as more of our data sets have been enriched by ML models and techniques like that. We need people like humans in the loop looking at that data. Now, they don't necessarily need to be technical in the sense of like they need to know how to code, and so that's where we've started to shift more and more to Databricks apps to kind of create, standardized experiences where they can interact with subsets of our data. They often are working with more sensitive data sets, but they don't need to see everything about that, and that's where Databricks apps can be a great way to get them the right access to what they need to do, be able to interact with that data, take kind of actions to augment or correct that data, but in a very controlled and guided manner. And so those have been kind of like our different layers to kind of control data access.
Cool. Makes sense. And Vivek, I love that slide you showed us that had, you're growing 5x, but the cost only grew 0.5x. I think that was like a huge takeaway, but I feel like there was a lot of work behind there. Right, it looks very easy on the slide, like, oh yeah, we just grew massively, but our costs stayed under control. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the kind of actual challenges you faced, what you had to push through to get that sort of kind of efficiency and growth?
That's a good question, right? So originally our intent was to start to migrate data from Mongo to Databricks, and our whole premise was, okay, we need to go and optimize for getting the exact same thing that we do it in Mongo, build the same dashboards, and provide experience more focused on developer experience rather than the business outcome and business experience and what we want to achieve. It first was move really fast, get everything done, and we'll figure that out what goes on there. In the process, we didn't even think about what the cost implications are going to be, because now we're talking about not move, lift, and shift, but also looking at a lot more data and a lot more capabilities that need to be added. So we started to focus more and more on how do we optimize cost and what controls we need to put into that. And the lesson that we learned, I would say that one of the biggest lessons that we learned in the process was, as a saying goes, it says, we need to, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with the team. And we actually really applied that. We started to think about, okay, I need to bring all the stakeholders together to get together, whether it's looking from a FinOps perspective, whether it's looking at business people, whether it's looking at sales, and everybody's customers, everybody engaged all together in the entire process and see how can we get faster to what we're looking for and achieve the business outcome. Also in the process, we identified there's lots of skill gaps. So the expectations were, okay, we will build a dashboard, but is it the dashboard is really achieving what the customers is looking for, or the sales team is looking for, or anybody looking for? So let's go and marry that and bridge the gap between and find out, okay, we have the data, let's go and find out the right insight that is going to be extremely critical for everybody to do that. So, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And you guys have talked a lot about kind of working with, like, kind of matching the right capabilities and access to the right folks in the org based on persona, talking about kind of bringing everyone onto the journey. Were there any tools or kind of third-party pieces and systems you integrated with that helped with this journey? I don't know, Anoop, if maybe you guys used any at Yipit.
Yeah, I think, there's definitely been a number of tools. For us, I think a lot of it started with Unity Catalog. Miranda, you kind of talked about it at the beginning, and we very much have seen that play out for us very well. We have so many data assets. It's like we have probably over 200,000 tables. Organizing that and kind of managing that, you need a centralized layer. So all data access for us is going through Unity Catalog. That's kind of the foundation. The thing with Unity Catalog and just with Databricks services, they are flexible. You're gonna have to design a system that makes sense for your organization. And for us, we kind of realized we need to model access control based on what our organization looks like. Like, what is our org structure? Who are those groups? Model that in Databricks so that, when people ask for access, they're not necessarily thinking about, oh, am I in the finance department, or am I a member of this corporate solutions team? They're just looking for, like, can I get access to this table? And that's just fine. That's kind of like how they're gonna go about their day. But we have to think more from a centralized perspective of, like, okay, if that person's gonna ask access, I know his teammate's gonna ask access for it tomorrow, and so on, so on. So we need to get ahead of that, and I think that's where, Databricks, Unity really work well, and kind of you can set up the group structure that makes sense. Give everyone access based on the groups they have. Don't try and go down the world of, like, hey, this person gets access to this person gets access to that. I think, like, those kind of principles have been very effective. In terms of other tools, I think some of the services and products that Databricks offers, we talked a little bit about Databricks Apps. I think that's been really effective. One thing I think that maybe sometimes is surprising, and we've kind of learned this over the last year with Databricks apps in general, is there's a lot of built-in frameworks that it comes with. I think in today's day and age with coding assistants and just how prevalent, like, lower code application frameworks that exist, you can actually create data apps very quickly, have it connect to your entire lakehouse, and choose very surgically what kind of data sets you want to control and what kind of insights you want to bring in. I think the keynotes today was a great example of how many different technologies you can just package together in one experience for someone. And so that's been a really effective tool where we have teams that need a range of access to different data sets, but they don't actually need to work with the data every day, or, like, work with it in a notebook or query, a terabyte of data. Like, they just need to be able to pull out certain insights and really not do anything else. And so we're able to kind of really tailor what are their operations and what are they supposed to do through Databricks apps. And I think that's been, like, a very good other end of the spectrum from, like, you have your engineers and data scientists really just working in the notebook environment. And then somewhere in between are kind of like the AI BI dashboards in Genie, which we've been actively moving to, where you want to bring in everyone else in the org that just needs to get, a live read or have certain questions that, would be better than a shoulder tap or a Slack ping. And so I think that's been, our kind of mix of tools that have been really effective for us.
Nice. Makes a lot of sense. I guess kind of as we look at how you guys have grown, and you've talked about this a little bit already, but it feels like there's always a little bit of a tension between governance and innovation. Certainly, I think some of the latest developments in Gen AI have made it more of a flashpoint, right? Everybody's always like, yes, I want both, but I don't think everybody always knows how to get there. And when that path isn't clear, it falls back to, like, I'm going to hold on to my governance, right? So Vivek, I don't know, maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you guys think about that at OneTrust, and, have you found the best of both worlds yet?
Yeah, I'll again use the analogy here, right? So if all of us has a fast-running car, and this only has an accelerator, how many of us will actually go and drive the car? Probably none, right? So we need a brake in the car, and we need an accelerator in the car to stay in the lane and follow the governance around that, right? The right use of, this is called responsible use of the car, right? So same thing we are doing, responsible use of data. So we need to actually go and have the right governance, and I don't think the governance is actually a distractor. It is actually an innovator or supporter in all of these cases, because we need to make sure we have the right guardrails, we follow the right practices, we use ethically we are using the right data and secure the data. So it is actually enabler, right, in my opinion. That's what we have seen it. So we actually start to bring in a lot of people who are responsible for making sure the data is actually governed correctly. We have a responsible AI committee. They come and talk about every use case that we have done it, and actually help us move faster and think about things that could matter and could actually be a distractor down the line. So think about that early on, so we don't have to go and change our course.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, best of both worlds, right?
Yeah.
Gas and brake. Okay. Well, I guess, I know we're wrapping up here, but Anoop, Vivek, I know everybody here kind of has some questions about cost controls and, learnings. I guess if you were going to distill it all down to one piece of advice, what would be your, like, top piece of advice for everybody here?
I can start. Yeah, I think for us, what we've realized over these past few years on this journey for us, Data democratization in general shouldn't be a technology-led initiative. And I think it kind of gets to what Vivek was just saying in the last question. Like, you need to find that alignment with your business stakeholders and treat it more as a collaborative exercise. It's going to be so hard it's just pulling teeth to try and get people to get excited about this stuff until they realize like how it actually impacts them and it's going to solve their problems. And so, what we've seen as a really effective pattern is if you're starting new in this area, focus on a specific use case, a specific business use case that's going to have real impact, and make sure that business leader, the project stakeholder, like they really kind of understand the vision, are bought in, and kind of design a solution with them. And then you can kind of socialize that win and kind of get momentum. And that's been the story for us, where when we first started with Databricks, it was only covering a certain part of our business, but as people started to see how quickly it could be productive, generate insights, generate business, and answer questions for our customers, it kind of created that flywheel effect internally where everyone else was raising their hands. And part of that is, you have to figure out how to make this transparent to everyone, both the outcomes, but also, I think the cost side of it as well. You don't want everyone to be like, hey, I want to use Databricks, it's just a magical thing, and not really understand, okay, there is a bill on the other side of it, there are resources, a return on investment that they need to make, but they should understand that. And so we've spent a lot of time over these years really kind of tuning how we do that cost attribution, tag everything sensibly, so that's like something that makes sense to the business stakeholders. And it's gotten to this place where we have like AI, BI dashboards that go straight to our CFO. And now he understands exactly every line item in Databricks, costs that we're generating, what it's related to, what business initiatives. So if there's a spike, he knows who to yell at, and it's not going to be us on the engineering side. It's going to be that business person, because he understands all these things are actually generating business on the data platform. And there's business needs involved, and there's just a trade-off that we're all going to have to balance.
Awesome. Vivek, what about you? Top.
I'll tag into what Anup was talking about, right? It is the cost is extremely critical, right? So if you look at cost with the percentage of the revenue, the more controls you can put in the cost, that's important, so that we can have more revenue and benefits from that altogether. Also, in my opinion, I think it's more important to also look at from a culture as much as architecture, because we focused a whole lot on culture, on architecture, and not on culture earlier. Data literacy is important. How do we make sure everybody understands what we are doing, changing the mindset and aligning the definition? That's another critical thing that we encountered, was the taxonomy across all of those business units that we have, exactly speaking the same language altogether, and build the trust in all the teams that you work with.
Yeah, makes sense. Everybody's got to be on board, or nobody's on board, essentially.
Exactly, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to say thank you guys both for coming and kind of sharing all these stories. We build features after talking to you, but I feel like the story behind the features gets lost. So really appreciate you both coming and kind of highlighting your journeys. And certainly, I'm sure folks can come up and ask some questions after if they're interested. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys all for joining us today. We're all going to hang around a little bit if you want to do a little bit of questions kind of off the cuff afterwards. And we really appreciate you guys coming and learning a little bit more about the journeys. Thanks so much.
Thanks all.